Hello, and welcome to this video on Dynamics 365 Business Central. In this video, we're going to look at an overview of the Business Central system with a brief focus on the financials, the payables, receivables, and finally, we'll come up with some of the assists that Microsoft provides to aid a user during the Business Central experience. I want to start with the home page of the Business Central system. We're really trying to accomplish two things here. Across the very top, I have a couple of toolbars that allow me to navigate through the system. The name of the company that I'm currently logged into is visible. That also serves as a Go Home button. Anytime I click on that name of the company, I'll be brought back here to the home page. To the right of that, I have a series of drop-down menus for finance, for cash management, for sales, etc. This is the primary navigation tool inside the Business Central system, and that's as deep or as sophisticated as the navigation gets. Just a single drop-down with a single list of all of the areas of the Business Central system that user can get to based upon their security role. In addition to the drop-down menus, I also have a series of one-click bookmarks that I can create for myself. So I don't have to do any memorization of where my customers live or vendors or anything else. I can simply click on that link and it will take me directly to that list. From the headline down is an area where Microsoft has allowed Business Central to bring information to the user. And this information is refreshed every time the user comes back to the Business Central homepage or every time they click on the company name. Information here is presented in a couple of different ways. It might simply be a balance, and then underneath that balance you'll see either a red or a green bar that will indicate the actual versus budget position for my overdue sales invoices or overdue purchase invoices or something. If I click on that value, it will take me back to a list and it will show me all of the overdue sales invoices. If I scroll down a little further, we see a series of tiles. Each tile is grouping together a particular transaction or activity type and quantifies for me how many transactions are in my open sales orders or my ongoing purchase invoices or approvals that I need to create or send inside the workflow system. We'll see the tiles again when we start to talk about the details inside the vendors and inside the customers. If I come down a little bit further, I can see where we start to present information in a graphical nature. We know from doing research that not all information is easily consumed with rows and columns of figures. In many instances, a graphic or an illustration will better serve to provide insight to the user about the information being conveyed. So within the Business Performance Insights, I have the ability to scroll through multiple charts. I can change the period of time that I'm looking at, maybe from a monthly view, I want to look at a quarterly view, etc. I can specify my favorite GL accounts and see what their current balances are. And because these balances underline when I hover over them, I can drill back and see all the transactions that make up those balances. We include Power BI as an option on the home page. We can also include Power BI images inside a particular record or transaction set. And finally, down across the bottom, I have a report inbox. I can teach Business Central which reports are important to me and schedule to have them delivered on a daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the appropriate time frame might be, and how format I want to have. Do I want them sent to me as PDF documents, for example, as you can see here. I'm going to go back up to the top of the home page, and let's turn our attention to the finance section. From the finance drop-down, I want to talk about a couple of things here. First, we'll talk about the chart of accounts. And for the GP users out there, this is an important point to consider. In the Business Central world, my chart of accounts is comprised of a single segment, the main account or the natural account number. In addition to specifying the posting accounts that I need to create that will actually hold balances, I'm going to create an outline or a basic structure for my financial statements at the same time. So in the account type column, You'll see posting accounts that hold balances. You'll also see headings. You'll see begin totals. If I scroll down a little bit, you'll see end total rows. This allows me to, again, create a structure, in this case for all of the assets on my balance sheet, and that's contained within a range of GL accounts. If I added in a new account within that range, it would automatically be included within the assets section of the balance sheet. That continues through liabilities, through owner's equity, income, cost of goods sold, direct and indirect expenses. Finally, down at the bottom, I get to a row that is a totaling row for the net income of all of the income and expense lines up above. Now, in some systems, you have additional segment values inside your chart of account format that allow you to designate internal departments or locations or lines of business, etc. In the Business Central world, we accomplish that same objective with the use of dimensions. From my list of dimensions, and we'll talk about a couple of these in detail, I have one dimension that's looking at an internal organization structure, my department codes. If I highlight that and click on the dimension drop-down, I can open a list that shows the actual department values themselves. Here I have department values for admin, marketing, production, and sales. What I do with these dimensions is add them on to the details of the transactions I'm processing. That information or dimension value is saved and posted along with the transaction, and then they become available later for doing reports, for doing analysis. I can sort or filter based on department values or dimension code values, so I can see the entire organization, or I can be more specific and look at a particular department and their revenue, their expenses. I can take a little more sophisticated approach when I create dimension values. I have a geographic dimension called area, and within that I have Europe North, non-European North, Europe South, America North, America South, etc. But I can group those together in much the same way that I had begin totals and end total rows in my chart of accounts. I can do the same thing here inside my dimension values and create a way to look at different organization at different levels of detail, whether it's the entire organization, just Europe, just America, or more specific than that, etc. So between the chart of accounts and its setup and the dimensions in its setup, I have the basis for creating my financial statements. I can be a little more specific about that. If I go into the financial reporting section and I pull up something like the values for an income statement, this is one version of an income statement where I've organized together a variety of different accounts, different balances. In this case, it's highly summarized. I could create another version of this same statement format that's done in detail. And then when I print my financial statements, I will be asked a couple of key questions. What format do you want to use? Do you want to filter by specific dimension values, etc.? From the finance menu, we also have our budgeting tools. We can budget at the GL level. We can also have budgets that support that, both for the revenue and for the expense side. If I pull up my GL budget and open it, I can see some header information across the top, and then I have the line information. In this case, I'm looking at the accounts as rows and periods as columns, but I could change that layout if I needed to. It's still the same budget, it's just a different way of presenting that budget information to the user. And I'm sure what will be a great relief to everyone who's looking, I have the opportunity to export my budget out to Excel. I can do my budgeting work and updating or even collaborating with colleagues, department heads, etc. out in the Excel tool. Once that budget has been completed in Excel, I then have the opportunity to import that back from Excel. And that would now be one of the budgets inside the Business Central system. You can define how long you want the budget to represent. Could be a full calendar year, fiscal year, 18-month, 3-year, whatever is appropriate for your planning purposes. You can have multiple budgets covering the same period of time. a best case scenario, worst case scenario, and maybe a third budget that was simply copied from last year's budget or even from last year's actuals, and use that as the basis for creating a new budget. As I mentioned, we have both revenue and expense budgeting as well. And if I go into something like my purchases budget, now I have the ability to actually budget at the vendor level. What am I going to spend for a particular expense type for each of the following periods? More detailed than I could do at something like a general ledger budget. Last thing I want to talk about here at the finance module, we have both statistical accounts which hold non-currency values. I might use that to represent the head count in my individual departments. And then I can use that as the basis for allocating costs via an allocation account, so that when I book an insurance expense, for example, I can automatically spread that across the following departments and use the head count in each department as the basis for that allocation percentage. Over time, I can change the values in the statistical accounts by creating a one-sided journal entry, and that would automatically change the allocation percentage for future transactions going forward. From here, let's turn our attention real quickly into the purchasing module. I want to talk about a couple key pieces here. We'll start by looking at a list of our vendors. I have the vendors and their brief details here for me in the list: name, contact information, current balances. The fact box to the right will illustrate for me the details that support whichever record I'm currently focused on. So I'm looking at vendor number 10,000, what's their current balance, what are my historical payments to them, etc. If I scroll down a little further, I can see the same tiles that we saw on the home page, but now they're restricted to only showing me the transaction history for this particular vendor. And if I focus on a different vendor, you'll see that those values in the fact box tiles will change over for me. I have the ability to personalize this view. I can personalize any view inside the Business Central system. I'm going to go ahead and close the fact boxes temporarily, click on my gear icon, and say I want to personalize this view. I can do that in a couple of different ways. Responsibility Center doesn't really make any impact on me. I'm going to hide that value out of the system. I want to move the search name function over a couple of positions. Sorry, try that again. There we go. Search name moves over. And I can add additional fields out of the database by simply dragging and dropping them wherever I'd like to have them. Maybe I want to add the purchaser code out here. So we'll put the purchaser code out as well. When I've completed my personalizations, I can simply click the Done button, and that will be saved. And again, this is personalization, so it's for me only. I'm not impacting any other user with the changes that I'm making. If I've made changes that I want to unwind, I can simply click the Clear Personalization and return this form to its original out-of-the-box condition. We'll go ahead and click Done on that. Let's drill back into one of these vendor records and talk about it real quickly. The master information that we record here will be used on all transactions for this vendor going forward as the default information for the transaction. You'll see in the tabbed sections, the general tab here, I might have a show more and a show less value, just a means of managing the screen real estate for the user. You can roll up a tab completely or hide it, but it will still keep key pieces of information visible for you. So in the address and contact information, email, phone numbers, address information, etc. is captured. In the invoicing section, I'm going to specify the defaults I want when I create a purchase invoice. Of particular interest is going to be the posting details. Both the general business posting group and the vendor posting group are set up in advance and hold the actual GL accounts to be used when transactions are processed, so I know what account to use for accounts payable or taxes payable or something of that nature. There will still be some instances where during transaction processing the user will have to hand key some of that information, but it's only some of that information. I'll hide the invoicing task tab, come down to the payment section, and you can see I have my payment terms code set, I have my payment methods set. Again, these are defaults and can be overridden when we create transactions for this particular vendor. Let's create a new vendor document. Or in this case, we're going to create a new purchase invoice. I have some information missing in the general section. I need a vendor invoice number. So we'll put in a value for that. And then I'm going to go ahead and close that general section so we got some more screen real estate to work with. Now, in the default, I am set to purchase items from this vendor. But in this case, it's just going to be a straight expense. So I'm going to book it directly to a general ledger expense account. And that expense account is going to relate to advertising expenses. I'll tab over to the right, find the quantity field. We ordered 2 units of advertising at $500 per unit. And that completes the details necessary to enter in this purchase invoice for the vendor. The next thing I would need to do would be to preview the posting of it. The preview posting doesn't show any errors, so this transaction is ready to be posted. I'm going to close the preview posting, and I'll go ahead and try to post this transaction. Now, Business Central knows that the workflow process for purchase approvals has been turned on, and that this purchase invoice is not yet approved, and that's what the error message is telling me. I must get it approved and then released before I can actually post the transaction through. So we'll request approval for this transaction, and we'll continue on our way. I'm going to close back out of that purchase invoice. I'm reminded that my document has been saved for me. It's an auto-save system, and every time I create a record and tab off a field, the system will save my progress for me. If I lose my connection, I won't lose any of the data that I've entered already. I can come right back to where I was. And we'll close back out of that vendor card, and that takes us back into the purchasing drop-down menu. So we've looked at the vendors. We just created a new purchase invoice, and we're waiting for approval on that. If I need to do some research, maybe I want to look into the posted purchase invoices, and I want to create a filtered view of that, and I want to look for something from a particular vendor number, let's say. I just want to see everything that relates to vendor number 30,000. That filtered view can now be saved. And every time I come back to this view of my posted purchase invoices, I can toggle between just vendor 30,000. I can see all of my transactions. I could create another filter. Maybe I want to look at particular dates. So I can find posting dates or document dates or transaction dates. As you can see, we have a whole wealth of fields available to do filtering by. And I could save that filtered view as well. If I need to do some more analysis with this information, I have the option to say I want to open this out in the Excel tool. The interactions between the Business Central system and the Excel system, indeed all of Office, Outlook, Teams, you'll see it simply scattered throughout the system. So now I have all that same information from my vendor posted purchase invoices list, but I now have it out in Excel, and I can create pivot tables, charts, graphs, additional analysis, whatever I might need to do with that information. If we turn our attention from purchasing over to the sales dropdown, you'll see a very similar setup here. And indeed, the customers list will look and behave very much like the vendors list. That's intentional. We designed Business Central so that a user who's been trained in one area of the system will immediately feel comfortable if they're asked to work in a different part of the system. All the tools, controls, prompts, visuals, they're all consistent throughout the system. So I could drill back into that customer record. I could create a new document for that. Maybe I need to just create a credit memo is all I'm going to be looking for that particular vendor activity, or excuse me, customer activity. I have historical information in my posted invoices, posted credit memos, etc. Very much the counterpart to what we saw over in the purchasing side. I did want to spend a moment talking a little bit about some of the reports that are available inside the Business Central system. And this menu shows me all of the different reports that are available out of the box in the Business Central system, organized into different areas. And I have the ability to expand those out wherever I might need to. So within sales, maybe I want to look at my sales reports, and I want to look at all my salespeople and teams, my customers. If the report I'm looking for isn't immediately visible here, one of the assists that is built into the system is a search function. And maybe what I really want to look at is just an aged receivables. So I put in a little bit of that phrase. Business Central recognizes a couple of options for me and says, oh, do you mean the aged accounts receivable report? There is also a view of that can be done in Excel if that's appropriate. I'll click on the link. It takes me into the controls where I could specify I want to look at all of my agings, or maybe I want to look for a specific customer or customer group or something. When I have all my selections made, I'm ready to preview that. Customer number, customer name, their credit limit, balances, and then the spread across my aging. Same would be true for an accounts payable aging report, or if I need to do that in summary or in detail, all of that's available for me. We've talked about a couple of the assists that are available inside the Business Central system, that search function being a very powerful one. And maybe from here I need to navigate to something around maybe my general ledger setup. I can put in, again, just a partial phrase, and Business Central will do what it can to interpret that for me, and then follow that link. Now here's where I can set up my global dimensions or my shortcut dimensions or whatever it might be. That search function then really becomes a secondary way for a user to navigate through the system without having to learn any of the drop-down menus, really trying to eliminate memorization as a tool inside the system. There are other ways that Microsoft can choose to assist us. We've talked about personalization. We've talked about the search function for navigation. I can also use that same search function, though, to find a record. I have somebody on the phone from the payables side that wants to know about their document 108213. They don't have any other information for me. I can simply put in that value and say, instead of searching through the structure of Business Central to find a report or a form or a window, search inside the company data and tell me what you can find that relates to that value. Here I can see that for 108213, I know that to be a posted purchase invoice from the Graphic Design Institute. And I could click on the link and it would take me back and it would show me that posted purchase invoice. Maybe I want to look at the general ledger entries that are associated with that transaction, or the vendor ledger entries, or the actual line details that go with that. So by simply knowing a simple piece of information, document number, name of a customer, all they can tell me is that first is part of their name. I have First Up consultants in my posted invoices. I have contacts for First Up consultants, general ledger entries, vendor entries, payment entries, etc. I don't have to know where this information lives. Business Central can handle that for me. I can simply use that search in company data function and find that information. The last assist that I want to talk about, and it's very exciting, Microsoft has introduced their co-pilots into Business Central, and they show up in a couple of different areas. If I go into the cash management module, for example, and I go over to bank account reconciliations, the first prompt that I get is to actually use the Microsoft co-pilot and say that I want to use that to do the reconciliation work for me. import the statement from the bank, compare the bank statement activity to the historic activity known inside the Business Central system. The Copilot will do its best effort to match off bank transactions against the Business Central transactions and present the user with just a list of the exceptions that need some human intervention. Maybe the dates between when the check was issued and when the check was cashed is too long. It's been more than 180 days. So let's have a human take a look at that first. Or maybe the dollar amounts don't quite match. There's a reversal somewhere that needs to be addressed. But the majority of the work can and should be done by the Copilot. That's its intention. That's its purpose in the system. We also have the ability to have Copilots inside the help function. So I could put in a particular value here that I wanted to learn about. I want to learn about purchase orders. Go search for purchase orders, and it would return back that information for me. Because I'm focused on bank account reconciliation, that's the link that would take me to if I wanted to look inside the help online. This is now taking me outside of Business Central proper onto the Microsoft site, but this is all of the details about Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. I'll go back to the home page one final time, and that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you've had an instructional time. I hope you've learned a lot, and I'll look forward to seeing you on our next video.